I still remember the sound it made when I slammed that engagement ring down on the kitchen counter. It wasn't the delicate clink you'd expect from something so small and supposedly precious. It was sharp, final, like a gavel closing a case. That ring had cost me 3 months of salary. I'd bought it myself after Nathan hemmed and hawed about ring shopping for weeks, making excuses about being too busy with work. I should have seen it then, the first crack in what I thought was our foundation. But I didn't. Or maybe I just didn't want to. That night, standing in our apartment with my bags already packed by the door, I told him something I'll never forget. I said his love was too weak to stand up against his parents' opinions, that it was like a structure without a foundation, just waiting to collapse at the slightest wind. The look on his face, that mixture of shock and wounded pride, it almost made me feel sorry for him. Almost. But before I tell you how satisfying it was to walk away and build something they could never tear down, I need you to do something for me. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt small in someone else's world, hit that like button. Subscribe, because trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. And drop a comment telling me, have you ever had to choose between being accepted and being respected? I'd love to hear your story too. Now let me take you back to where it all started, 8 months before that ring hit the counter. I met Nathan Brooks at a gallery opening in Chelsea. I wasn't supposed to be there at all. My friend Mara, who worked in production design, had dragged me along because she thought I needed to get out more. "You're going to become one of those architects who only talks to buildings," she'd said, shoving a glass of wine into my hand as we walked through the door. The gallery was showing experimental architecture photography, which was the only reason I agreed to go. I was standing in front of this massive photograph of a deconstructed building, all exposed beams and deliberate chaos, when someone behind me said, "It looks like it's falling apart, but I bet it's the strongest thing in the peak room." I turned around, and there he was. Tall, handsome in that casual, wealthy way where the expensive clothes look effortless. Dark hair, blue eyes, a smile that seemed genuine. Nathan Brooks, though I didn't know his last name mattered yet. "It's the principle of controlled destruction," I replied, gesturing at the photo. "Sometimes you have to tear things down to their bones to see what's really holding them up." He laughed. "Are you an architect?" "I am." "Xenia Ward." I handed him my card, which I always carried even to social events. You never knew when you'd meet a potential client. "Nathan Brooks." He took my card, studied it. "Sustainable residential design. That's interesting. Most architects I know are more interested in making statements than making sense." We talked for 2 hours that night. He was charming, attentive, asking questions about my work that seemed genuinely curious rather than politely obligatory. He told me he worked in investment management, that he'd grown up in Westchester, that he loved the city but sometimes missed having space to breathe. When he asked for my number, I gave it to him without hesitation. Mara found me at the end of the night, grinning. "So who was that?" she asked as we walked to the subway. "Nathan Brooks," I said. "Investment guy. Seemed nice." "Nice," Mara repeated. "Girl, he looked at you like you were the only person in that room." "When's the date?" "He didn't ask me out," I protested. "He will," Mara said confidently. "And when he does wear the blue dress, it makes you look like you could design the world and then build it yourself." She was right. Nathan called 2 days later and asked me to dinner. We went to this intimate Italian place in the West Village, the kind with checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles. It was perfect. He was perfect. He asked about my parents and didn't flinch when I told him they'd died in a car accident when I was 20, that I'd finished school with loans and scholarships and sheer determination. He told me about his family, casually mentioning the estate in Westchester, the company his father ran, but in a way that felt like he was sharing rather than bragging. By our 3rd date, I was falling for him. By the 6th, I was in love. He was everything I thought I wanted: successful, intelligent, supportive of my career. When I showed him the small office I rented in Brooklyn, the one room where I ran my entire firm, he didn't laugh or suggest I was thinking too small. He said, "This is where empires start, Zen. Right here in rooms like this." 3 months in, he asked me to move in with him. His apartment in Tribeca was beautiful, all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows, so different from my tiny studio in Bushwick. I hesitated, worried it was too fast, but Nathan was persuasive. "I want to wake up next to you every morning," he said. "I want to come home to you every night. What's the point of having all this space if you're not in it?" So I moved in. I gave up my studio, packed my life into boxes, and started this new chapter. For the first few months, it was blissful. We'd cook dinner together, work side by side at the dining table, fall asleep watching old movies. He came to my project sites and asked intelligent questions. I went to his work functions and charmed his colleagues. We fit together, or so I thought. The first time he mentioned his parents wanting to meet me, I was excited. I'd been with Nathan for 5 months, and meeting the family felt like a natural next step. But something in his expression gave me pause, a flicker of anxiety that disappeared so quickly I almost thought I'd imagined it. "They can be a bit intense," he said carefully. "Just don't take anything they say too personally. They're very protective of me." I should have asked more questions. I should have pressed him on what intense meant, what don't take it personally implied. But I was in love and optimistic, and I thought I could handle anything. The Brooks family estate in Westchester was the kind of place that appeared in architectural magazines, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows that made you feel like you were living inside a piece of art. We drove up on a Sunday afternoon in October, the trees brilliant with fall colors, and I remember thinking how beautiful it all was, how lucky Nathan was to have grown up here. That illusion lasted about 5 minutes. Caroline Brooks opened the door before we even knocked, as if she'd been watching for us from the window. She was tall, elegant, wearing a cream cashmere sweater and pearls that probably cost more than my car. Her smile was perfectly practiced, the kind you see on women who've spent their lives in country clubs and charity galas. "You must be Xenia," she said, looking me up and down in a way that made me feel like I was being appraised. "Nathan has told us so much about you. Come in, come in." The house was as cold inside as it was beautiful. Not temperature-wise, but in that way that spaces feel when they're designed to impress rather than to live in. Everything was white or cream or some shade of expensive neutrality. There were fresh flowers in crystal vases, abstract art on the walls, furniture that looked like it had never been sat on. It was stunning and completely sterile, like a magazine spread rather than a home. Richard Brooks was in the living room, standing by a marble fireplace with a glass of scotch in his hand, even though it was barely noon. He was in his early 60s, still handsome with silver hair and the kind of bearing that comes from generations of wealth and privilege. He looked at me with the same assessing gaze as his wife, and I felt suddenly conscious of my dress, my shoes, every choice I'd made that morning. "So you're the architect," he said, not bothering with pleasantries like hello or welcome. "Nathan mentioned you have your own firm. That's quite ambitious for someone so young." "I'm 33, I replied, keeping my voice steady, even though something about his tone set me on edge. "And yes, I started Ward Architecture 5 years ago. We focus on sustainable residential design." "Sustainable," Caroline repeated, as if I'd said something quaint or amusing. "How lovely." "Richard didn't. The Harrisons just built that enormous place in the Hamptons. 10,000 square feet, wasn't it?" "At least," Richard said, his eyes still on me. "Beautiful place. Cost them $15 million, but it's worth every penny." I don't believe they worried much about sustainability. The implication hung in the air that real architecture, important architecture, was measured in size and cost, not in environmental responsibility or thoughtful design. I felt Nathan's hand tighten on mine, but he said nothing. That should have been my first warning, but I told myself he was just nervous about me meeting his parents. I told myself it would get better. It didn't get better. Lunch was served in a formal dining room that could have seated 20 people. The 4 of us sat at one end of a massive mahogany table with so much space between us that we had to project our voices. Caroline had made sure I was seated next to her, which I would learn was never a good sign. The food was elegant and tasteless, the kind of meal that looks better than it tastes. As we ate, Caroline peppered me with questions that felt more like an interrogation than polite conversation. "Tell me about your family, Xenia," she said, delicately cutting her salmon. "Where did you grow up?" "New Jersey originally," I replied. "My parents died when I was in college, so I've been on my own for a while." "Oh, how tragic," Caroline said, but her tone suggested she found it more awkward than tragic. "And you put yourself through school? That must have been so difficult." "It was challenging," I admitted, "but it taught me a lot about perseverance and self-reliance." "I'm sure it did," she said in a way that somehow made self-reliance sound like a character flaw. "Richard, didn't the Sutton girl go to Yale?" "What was her name again?" "Leah," Richard supplied. "Leah Sutton. Wonderful family, old money, very cultured. She and Nathan dated for, what was it, 2 years?" "Just about," Nathan said quietly, and I noticed he wouldn't meet my eyes. "Such a lovely girl," Caroline continued. "So accomplished. She's an art curator now, isn't she? At one of the major galleries. We had lunch with her mother just last month. Margaret was saying that Leah had just curated the most extraordinary exhibit at the Modern." "I haven't had a chance to see it," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Oh, you should," Caroline said. Laya always had such exquisite taste. Vision. I remember she once described her dream home to me, a glass structure overlooking Manhattan, something truly iconic and breathtaking. She paused, looking at me expectantly. Do you ever work on projects like that, Zinnia? Truly visionary work. I set down my fork, carefully aware that everyone was watching me. I don't build castles in the air, Caroline, I said. I build things that can actually stand. And I believe that sometimes the most visionary work starts with the most humble foundation. A glass tower overlooking Manhattan might look impressive, but if it's not sustainable, if it's not responsible to the environment and the community around it, then it's just another monument to ego. How refreshingly idealistic, Richard said, and the word idealistic sounded like an insult in his mouth. But the world doesn't run on idealism, young lady. It runs on capital, on reputation, on knowing the right people. Those glass towers you're so dismissive of, they're built by architects with big names and bigger budgets. That's what people remember. I understand that perspective, I replied, meeting his gaze. But I'd rather be remembered for building something that matters than something that's just big. Caroline laughed, a tinkling sound that made my skin crawl. How sweet. Nathan, darling, your Xenia is quite the idealist, isn't she? Nathan shifted uncomfortably. She's passionate about her work, he said weakly. It's one of the things I love about her. But he didn't defend me. He didn't tell his mother to stop mocking my values. He didn't point out that his parents were being condescending and rude. He just sat there pushing food around his plate, caught between his family and me and choosing neither. The rest of that first lunch was excruciating. Every topic of conversation seemed designed to highlight the differences between me and the Brooks family, between me and the mythical perfect Laya Sutton. They talked about people I didn't know, places I'd never been, social events I'd never be invited to. Caroline asked about my clothes, suggesting boutiques where she shopped, places where a single dress cost what I paid in rent. Richard questioned my business model, suggesting that a small firm like mine would never attract the kind of clients that mattered. Through it all, Nathan said nothing. He nodded along with his parents, laughed at their jokes, agreed with their assessments. The man who'd told me I could build an empire from my one-room office sat there silently while his parents implied that my empire wasn't worth building. When we finally left, driving back to the city in tense silence, I waited for Nathan to say something. I waited for an apology, an explanation, an acknowledgement that his parents had been awful, but he just drove his jaw tight, his hands gripping the steering wheel. Your parents don't like me, I finally said. They don't know you yet, Nathan replied, which wasn't a denial. They have certain expectations. They'll come around. Expectations that I don't meet, I said. Zen, please. He reached over and took my hand. Don't make this into a big thing. It was one lunch. My parents are protective, that's all. They just want to make sure I'm with someone who understands our world. Our world, I repeated. And I don't understand it. You come from a different background, Nathan said, and I could hear the discomfort in his voice. That's not a criticism, it's just a fact. My parents, they value certain things. Connections, social, standing the right schools and the right families. It takes time for them to accept someone who's outside that circle. So I have to prove myself to them, I said. You have to let them get to know you, Nathan corrected. That's all. Just give it time. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think that with patience and effort I could win over Caroline and Richard Brooks, that they'd eventually see my worth. So I agreed to try. I agreed to more Sunday dinners, to more stilted conversations, to more not-so-subtle comparisons to Laya Sutton. Over the next few months, those Sunday dinners became a weekly ordeal. We'd drive up to Westchester every week and I'd brace myself for whatever fresh hell Caroline and Richard had prepared. Sometimes it was overt, like the time Caroline suggested I might want to close my firm and focus on charity work once Nathan and I were married. Sometimes it was subtle, like the way Richard would change the subject whenever I talked about my projects, but listen intently when Nathan discussed his work. Nathan proposed 6 months after I met his parents. He did it at the apartment, no big production, just him and me, and a ring that was beautiful but somehow impersonal, like he'd had a jeweler pick it out without really thinking about what I'd like. I said yes because I loved him, because I wanted to believe that we could overcome his family's disapproval, because I thought that once we were married, things would change. They didn't change. They got worse. The engagement party was Caroline's idea, though she called it our engagement party, like I'd had any say in it. She insisted on hosting it at the estate, on inviting her friends and Nathan's business associates, on planning every detail from the flowers to the menu to the music. Every suggestion I made was politely acknowledged and then ignored. The night of the party, I wore a dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion, something elegant but not too flashy, expensive but not extravagant. I'd spent an hour on my hair and makeup wanting to look perfect, wanting to prove that I belonged in the Brooks family world. It didn't matter. Nothing I did was ever going to be enough. The party was full of people I didn't know, all of them dressed in clothes that screamed old money and good breeding. They smiled at me with polite distance, congratulated Nathan with genuine warmth, and treated me like an interesting but temporary addition to his life. I heard whispers, saw the curious glances, felt the assessment in every conversation. Caroline had invited Leia Sutton. That's when I knew this wasn't just about introducing me to their world. This was about showing me that I didn't belong in it. Leia was beautiful in that effortless way that comes from good genes and better skincare. She wore a simple black dress that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, and she moved through the party like she owned it, kissing cheeks and laughing at jokes, and generally being everything that Caroline thought Nathan's partner should be. I watched Nathan's face when he saw her. There was surprise, discomfort, but also something else. Nostalgia maybe, or regret. They talked for a long time, standing by the French doors that overlooked the garden, their heads close together in a way that made my stomach clench. Ella, Nathan's younger sister, found me standing alone by the bar. Ella was different from the rest of the Brooks family, softer, somehow more real. She'd chosen to be a social worker instead of joining the family business, a choice that Caroline mentioned with barely concealed disappointment whenever the subject came up. "I'm sorry about all this," Ella said, quietly standing next to me. "About Leia being here, about everything. My mother, she can be cruel," I supplied. "Manipulative. Determined to make me feel like I'm not good enough for her son." Ella winced. "All of those things, yeah. For what it's worth, I think you're great. You're real, you know. You actually care about things that matter, not just about appearances and social climbing." "Tell that to your brother," I said, watching Nathan laugh at something Leia said. "He seems to have forgotten I exist." "He's scared," Ella said. "Of disappointing them, of being cut off, of having to actually make his own choices. He's always been like this, doing what they want, taking the path they lay out for him." "Then why did he ask me to marry him?" I asked. "If he just wanted someone they'd approve of, he could have stayed with Leia." Ella looked at me with something like pity. "Maybe he thought he could have both. You and their approval. Maybe he thought if he just tried hard enough, they'd come around." "But they're not going to come around, are they?" I said. "Not unless you become someone you're not," Ella replied. "And I hope you won't do that. I hope you'll stay exactly who you are." But I couldn't stay who I was and be part of the Brooks family. That was becoming increasingly clear. Later that night, I was standing alone by the French doors, looking out at the garden, and trying to remember why I'd agreed to this engagement in the first place, when Caroline approached with a group of her friends. They were all of a type, elegant, poised, wealthy women who'd spent their lives perfecting the art of the polite cut. "Ladies, this is Zinnia, Nathan's fiancé," Caroline announced. "Zinnia is quite accomplished. She runs her own architecture firm." "How wonderful," one of the women said in a tone that suggested it was anything but wonderful. "And what kind of architecture do you do, dear?" I explained my work, my focus on sustainability and residential design, and I could see the glaze of boredom settle over their faces. These were women who hired architects to build their summer homes and their second homes and their just because homes, but they didn't actually care about architecture. They cared about the names attached to the projects, the price tags, the social cachet. "How quaint," another woman said. "My husband and I just commissioned a house in Nantucket. 12,000 square feet. I don't think the architect mentioned anything about sustainability." Caroline laughed. "Well, different priorities for different people, I suppose." Zinnia is very passionate about her work, even if it is a bit, shall we say, small scale. And there it was. Small scale. Like my entire career, everything I'd worked for and built was just a hobby, just something to pass the time until I married into real importance. I felt something crack inside me, then something that had been bending under pressure for months. My jaw tightened and my hands clenched at my sides, but I kept my voice level when I spoke. "Actually, Caroline," I said, "some of the most important architectural innovations happen at what you call small scale. Sustainability isn't about the size of the building, it's about responsibility. It's about creating structures that will last, that will serve communities, that won't destroy the environment for the sake of ego or status." The women looked uncomfortable, glancing at each other with that particular expression wealthy people get when someone challenges their worldview. Caroline's smile remained fixed, but her eyes went cold. "Of course, dear," she said. "We admire your passion, really, we do. But you know, once you and Nathan are married, you'll be so busy with social obligations and charity work and all the responsibilities that come with being part of this family. You might not have as much time for your little projects. My little projects. Those words hit me like a slap. Years of education, years of building my business from nothing, sacrificing and struggling and succeeding, and she'd reduced it all to little projects like I was a child playing with blocks. I excused myself before I said something I couldn't take back. I found a bathroom on the second floor and locked myself inside, staring at my reflection in the mirror. I looked the same as I had that morning, but I felt completely different. I felt small. I felt worthless. I felt like everything I'd accomplished meant nothing to these people, and by extension meant nothing to Nathan because he was one of these people. I splashed cold water on my face and gave myself a stern talking to. You're better than this, I told my reflection. You've worked too hard and come too far to let Caroline Brooks make you feel small. Get through tonight, and then you and Nathan need to have a serious conversation. But when I went back downstairs, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Nathan was in the library with his parents, and Laya, the four of them, talking intently about something. Through the partially open door, I heard Caroline's voice. She's not suitable, Nathan. I'm sorry to be so blunt, but someone needs to say it. She doesn't understand our world, she doesn't have the right connections, and frankly, her little architecture business is an embarrassment. What will people think when they hear that your wife runs a tiny firm out of Brooklyn? I heard Richard chime in. Your mother is right, son. You could do better. You should do better. Laya here, she understands what it means to be part of a family like ours. I waited for Nathan to defend me. I waited for him to tell his parents they were wrong, that I was exactly what he wanted, that my career was something to be proud of, not embarrassed by. I waited for him to be the man I'd fallen in love with, the man who told me I could build an empire. Nathan's voice when he spoke was quiet, uncertain. I know she's not what you expected. I know she's different from Laya. But I do care about her. Caring isn't enough, Caroline said sharply. Marriage isn't about feelings, Nathan. It's about partnership, about building a life that makes sense. Can you honestly see her fitting into our world? Can you see her at the club, at the charity galas, representing the Brooks name? There was a long pause. Then Nathan said something that shattered what was left of my heart. No, he admitted. I don't know if I can see that. Maybe you're right. Maybe I rushed into this. Maybe I need to reconsider. I must have made a sound because Ella appeared beside me, her face stricken. She'd heard it too. Xenia, she whispered, but I was already walking away. I found my coat and my purse. I walked out of that house without saying goodbye to anyone, without making a scene, without giving them the satisfaction of seeing me break. I called a car and waited at the end of the long driveway as far from that house as I could get while still technically being on their property. Nathan found me there 20 minutes later, running down the driveway in his suit jacket, out of breath. Xenia, wait, he called out. Please wait. I turned to face him, and I was surprised by how calm I felt. Not angry, not sad, just calm and clear and certain. I heard you, I said. In the library. I heard what you told your parents. His face went white. That wasn't, I didn't mean it the way it sounded. You told them you rushed into this engagement, I said. You told them you need to reconsider. You agreed that I don't fit into your world. Which part didn't you mean, Nathan? All of it, he said desperately. I was just trying to placate them. I was trying to get them to back off. By throwing me under the bus, I asked. By agreeing with every horrible thing they said about me, that's your strategy for getting them to back off. What do you want me to do? He demanded, and suddenly there was anger in his voice. They're my parents, Zen. I can't just cut them off or tell them to go to hell. That's not how families like mine work. Families like yours, I repeated. Families where it's okay to insult and demean the person your son is supposed to marry. Families where appearances matter more than character. Families where love is conditional on meeting impossible standards. You don't understand, Nathan said. You didn't grow up like this. You don't know what it's like to have these kinds of expectations. You're right, I said. I didn't grow up with money or connections or a safety net. I had to build everything myself. And that's exactly why I know that what your family has isn't worth having. All that wealth, all that social standing, and they're still miserable. They're still cruel. And you're so terrified of losing their approval that you're willing to sacrifice me for it. That's not fair, Nathan protested. What's not fair is that I've spent months trying to prove myself to people who were never going to accept me, I said. What's not fair is that you let me think we were building a future together when you were always going to choose them over me. I do choose you, Nathan said, but his voice lacked conviction. No, you don't, I replied. And honestly, I don't blame you. They raised you, they shaped you, they made you who you are. But Nathan, who you are isn't someone I can marry. You're not strong enough to stand up for what you want. You're not brave enough to disappoint them. And I can't spend my life being second choice in my own marriage. My car pulled up, then headlights cutting through the darkness. I turned to get in, but Nathan grabbed my arm. "Don't do this," he said. "Don't leave like this. Let's go home and talk about it. We can figure this out." I looked down at his hand on my arm, then up at his face. There was desperation there, but also relief. Relief that I was the one making this decision, that he wouldn't have to be the bad guy, that he could tell his parents it was all my fault. I pulled my arm free. "I'll get my things from the apartment tomorrow while you're at work," I said. "Don't try to stop me." I got in the car and didn't look back as we drove away. Behind me, Nathan stood in the driveway of his family's estate, and I wondered if he'd go back inside and tell them what happened, if Caroline would console him while secretly being thrilled, if Richard would pour him a scotch, and talk about dodging a bullet. I didn't cry in the car. I didn't cry when I got back to the apartment we shared and started packing my things. I moved through the rooms mechanically, taking only what was mine, leaving no trace of myself behind. I worked through the night, and by morning I had 3 suitcases packed and ready to go. Nathan came home around 8 a.m. looking exhausted and desperate. He'd clearly been driving around all night trying to decide what to do. "Zen, please," he started. I held up my hand. "I don't want to hear it, Nathan. I don't want the apologies or the excuses or the promises that things will change. Because they won't change. Your parents will always hate me. You'll always be too weak to stand up to them. And I'll always be the outsider trying to earn a place in a family that doesn't want me there." "I love you," he said, and tears were running down his face now. "I know you do," I replied. "But your love isn't a foundation, Nathan. It's a decoration. It's pretty, but it's not structural. And the first strong wind, which tonight proved it, just blows away." He tried to argue to convince me to stay, but I was done listening. I'd spent months listening to his family tear me down and him do nothing about it. I'd spent months making myself smaller and quieter and less, trying to fit into a space that was never meant for me. I called Mara, who came to get me and my suitcases without asking any questions. As I was leaving, I turned back one last time. "You need to find someone your parents approve of," I told Nathan. "Someone from the right family with the right background who'll be happy being Mrs. Nathan Brooks and nothing more. But that person isn't me. That person will never be me." He was still standing in the doorway when we drove away, still crying, still not understanding that this wasn't about one bad night or one overheard conversation. This was about fundamental incompatibility, about values that didn't align, about a future that would only break me down piece by piece until there was nothing left of who I was. Mara let me stay with her in her studio apartment in Bushwick. It was cramped with both of us there, but I didn't care. I slept on her couch and cried for 3 days straight, mourning not just Nathan, but the life I'd imagined with him, the future I'd planned, the family I'd thought I could be part of. On the 4th day, Mara sat down next to me and handed me a cup of coffee. "Okay," she said. "You've had your breakdown. Now what?" "Now I rebuild," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. "From what I'm hearing, you need to do more than rebuild," Mara said gently. "You need to build something entirely new. Something that's just yours, that no one can take from you or diminish or make you feel small about." She was right. I needed to stop thinking about what I'd lost and start thinking about what I could create. That same day, as if the universe was listening, I got an email that would change everything. It was from the Riverside Development Council regarding a position I'd applied for months ago, so long ago I'd almost forgotten about it. The email was formal and official, and as I read it, my hands started shaking. "Dear Miss Ward," it began. "We are pleased to inform you that after extensive review of all applications, you have been selected as the lead architect for the Riverside Urban Renewal Project. This is a comprehensive development initiative that will include residential buildings, commercial spaces, and public areas with a strong emphasis on sustainable and community-focused design. We were particularly impressed by your portfolio and your innovative approach to urban architecture. Please contact us at your earliest convenience to discuss contract details and start dates." I read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. This was enormous. This was the kind of project that architects dreamed about, the kind that could define a career. And they wanted me. Mara found me sitting on her couch, staring at my laptop with tears streaming down my face. "What happened?" she asked, alarmed. "Did Nathan do something?" I turned the laptop toward her wordlessly. She read the email and then let out a whoop that probably woke all her neighbors. This is incredible. She screamed. This is huge. When do you start? 2 weeks, I said through my tears. I have 2 weeks to find a place to live to get my affairs in order to prepare. Mara grabbed my shoulders. Listen to me, Xenia Ward. This isn't a collapse. This is a repositioning. Those Brooks assholes just did you the biggest favor of your life. They freed you up to take on the project that's going to make you a star. She was right. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I could breathe. I felt like the path ahead of me was clear and bright and entirely mine. That night, Nathan called for the 100th time. I'd been ignoring his calls and texts, but something made me answer this one. Zen, he said, relief flooding his voice. Thank God. I've been trying to reach you for days. We need to talk. There's nothing to talk about, Nathan, I replied calmly. Please just let me explain. My parents, they came around. They realized they were wrong about you. We had a long talk after you left, and I made them understand how important you are to me. And what did it take for them to come around? I asked. What changed? Nathan hesitated. They heard about the Riverside project. Apparently it's a big deal. My father knows some people on the development council, and they mentioned your name. There it was. They didn't come around because Nathan had finally stood up to them. They came around because I'd achieved something they couldn't ignore, something that gave me value in their world. So they respect me now because I have a prestigious project, I said. Not because I'm a talented architect or a good person or someone who loves their son, but because I have something that looks good on their social resume. It's not like that, Nathan protested weakly. It's exactly like that, I said. And honestly, Nathan, it doesn't matter anymore. I don't want their approval. I don't want to be part of a family where my worth is measured by my success rather than my character. But I want you back, Nathan said. I miss you. I love you. You miss the idea of me, I corrected. You love the version of me that made you feel like a good person, like someone who could defy his parents and choose his own path. But you're not that person, Nathan. And I'm tired of pretending you could be. I hung up before he could respond. Then I blocked his number and his parents' numbers and anyone else connected to the Brooks family except Ella, who'd sent me a kind text saying she was proud of me and sorry about everything. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind. I found an apartment in a building with a view of the Manhattan skyline, nothing fancy, but it was mine and mine alone. I prepared for the Riverside project, researching every aspect of the development, reaching out to contractors and engineers, sketching initial concepts. I threw myself into work the way I always had when life got hard and work had never let me down. The first day on the Riverside project was everything I'd dreamed of. The team was talented and passionate, the scope was ambitious, but achievable, the vision was clear. We were going to create something meaningful, something that would serve the community, something that would last. I thought I was done with the Brooks family. I thought they were in my past, a chapter I'd closed, but I should have known they wouldn't let go that easily. 3 weeks after I started at Riverside, Nathan showed up at my apartment building. He was waiting outside when I got home from work, and he looked terrible. He'd lost weight, there were dark circles under his eyes, and his usually perfect clothes were rumpled. How did you find my address? I asked tiredly. I hired someone, he admitted. I know that sounds creepy, but Zen, I need to talk to you. Please, just give me 5 minutes. I should have walked past him. I should have called security. But some small part of me, the part that had loved him once, agreed to listen. We sat on the steps of my building, a careful distance between us. My life is falling apart, Nathan said without preamble. The business is failing. My father pulled my funding because he's furious that I let you go. My mother won't speak to me. Even Ella is disappointed in me. I'm sorry you're going through that, I said, and I meant it. But Nathan, that's not my problem to fix. I know, he said quickly. I know I don't deserve your help or your forgiveness. But I need you to know that I've been thinking about everything you said. About how I was too weak to stand up to them. About how my love wasn't strong enough. And you were right about all of it. Acknowledging it doesn't change anything, I said gently. I told them off, Nathan continued, and there was a desperate edge to his voice now. After the business started failing, after they cut me off financially, I went to the estate and I told them exactly what I thought of them. I told them they were cruel and manipulative, and that they'd made me lose the best thing in my life. What did they say? I asked, curious despite myself. My mother cried, Nathan said. She actually cried, which I've never seen her do. And my father, he said I'd made my choice and now I had to live with it. They've barely spoken to me since. I felt a pang of something, not quite sympathy, but close to it. I'm sorry you're estranged from your family, I said. That must be incredibly hard. It is, Nathan admitted. But it also made me realize something. I spent my whole life trying to please them, trying to live up to their expectations, and for what? They cut me off the second I stepped out of line. All that loyalty, all that obedience, and it meant nothing. So what do you want from me? I asked. I want a second chance, Nathan said, turning to face me fully. I want to show you that I've changed, that I can be the man you needed me to be. I want to prove that my love for you isn't weak anymore. I looked at this man I'd once planned to marry, and I felt a sadness that was tinged with relief. He was learning, growing, maybe even becoming a better person. But it was too late for us. Nathan, I said gently, I'm glad you're figuring this out. I'm glad you're learning to stand up for yourself. But you can't rebuild a house on a cracked foundation. Our relationship, it was built on compromise and hoping things would get better, and that's not strong enough. But we could start over, Nathan insisted. We could build something new. I'm already building something new, I told him. And it doesn't include you. I need you to understand that this isn't about revenge or punishment or even anger anymore. It's about recognizing that we're not right for each other. You need someone who fits easily into your world, whatever that world becomes. And I need someone who celebrates my success instead of being intimidated by it. I still love you, he said quietly. Maybe you do, I replied. But love isn't enough, Nathan. Love without respect, without courage, without partnership, that's not the kind of love that builds a life. That's the kind that leaves you standing on broken ground. I stood up and Nathan did too. We looked at each other for a long moment, and I saw acceptance finally settling into his expression. I hope you figure things out, I said. I hope you build something real and solid for yourself. But I can't be part of that process. I know, Nathan said. I just needed to try one more time. He walked away, then hands in his pockets, shoulders slumped, and I watched him go without regret. That chapter was closed, finished, complete. The months that followed were transformative in ways I couldn't have imagined. The Riverside project consumed my days and some of my nights, but in the best possible way. I was creating something meaningful, something that would outlast all of us, and every beam placed and every design approved felt like a victory. The team loved working with me. My ideas were respected, my vision was celebrated, and for the first time in a long time, I felt valued for exactly who I was. No one questioned whether I belonged there. No one suggested my work was too small scale or that I should focus on something else. I was the lead architect, and I'd earned that position through talent and hard work, not through connections or family name. But the universe wasn't done with the Brooks family drama. Of course it wasn't. 4 months into the Riverside project, I received a formal invitation to a charity gala being hosted by the city's Development Council. It was a major event, one where all the key players in urban development would be present. Attendance was essentially mandatory for someone in my position. The invitation came with a note from my project supervisor, Riverside, will be featured prominently at the gala. We'd like you to give a brief presentation about the project and your design philosophy. This is an excellent opportunity to showcase your work. I was excited and nervous. This was exactly the kind of visibility that could take my career to the next level. I prepared my presentation meticulously, had a dress custom made, and practiced my speech until I could give it in my sleep. The night of the gala, I arrived at the venue, a historic hotel in Manhattan, feeling confident and prepared. The ballroom was stunning, all crystal chandeliers and marble floors filled with the city's most influential people in development, architecture, and urban planning. I was networking with a group of developers when I saw them. The Brooks family. All of them, Richard, Caroline, Nathan, and even Ella. They were across the ballroom, and clearly they'd seen me too. My supervisor appeared at my elbow. "Ah, excellent," he said. "The Brooks family is here. Richard is on the Development Council, you know. Very influential. You should definitely make a point of speaking with them." I kept my expression neutral. "Actually, I know the Brooks family. Quite well." "Oh, wonderful," my supervisor said, oblivious to the tension. "Then you should definitely reconnect. Networking is half of what these events are about." Before I could respond, Caroline Brooks was making her way toward me, Richard and Nathan following behind her. Ella hung back, looking uncomfortable. Caroline's smile was different from the last time I'd seen her. It was warmer, more genuine, or at least a better imitation of genuine. "Xenia," she said, extending her hand. "How wonderful to see you. We've been following your work on the Riverside project. It's quite impressive." I shook her hand because I had to, because we were in public and professionalism demanded it. "Thank you," I replied coolly. Richard stepped forward. "We were wrong about you, Xenia. We should have recognized your talent from the beginning. We hope you'll forgive us for our initial skepticism. I looked at these people who had made me feel worthless, who had insulted my work and my background and my worth, and now they were apologizing because I'd achieved something they couldn't ignore. The irony wasn't lost on me. I appreciate the apology, I said carefully. But let's be clear about what you're apologizing for. You weren't skeptical of my talent. You were dismissive of me as a person. You judged me based on my background, my connections, and my bank account, not on my abilities or my character. Caroline's smile faltered. We may have been a bit hasty in our assessment, she admitted. A bit hasty, I repeated. You told your son he could do better than me. You compared me unfavorably to his ex at every opportunity. You called my career my little projects. You made it clear that I would never be good enough for your family unless I gave up everything that made me who I am. The people around us had gone quiet listening to this confrontation with poorly disguised interest. Nathan looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him. You're right, Richard said, and he actually looked uncomfortable. We were wrong. We let our prejudices and our expectations cloud our judgment. And we're sorry, Nathan finally spoke. Zen, I've been trying to tell them for months that they misjudged you. But they had to see it for themselves. This project, what you've accomplished, it opened their eyes. That's the problem, Nathan, I said, turning to face him directly. They only opened their eyes because I succeeded in a way they couldn't ignore. If the Riverside project hadn't happened, if I'd stayed with my small firm and my sustainable residential designs, your parents would still think I wasn't good enough. And you'd still be too weak to defend me. I'm not that person anymore, Nathan protested. I stood up to them. I told them they were wrong. You stood up to them after I left, I said. You defended me after I didn't need defending anymore. And that's too little too late. Caroline stepped forward, and for the first time since I'd met her, she looked vulnerable. We'd like a chance to make amends, she said. We'd like to start over, perhaps have you to dinner at the estate. We could discuss the Riverside project and you could share your vision with us. The offer hung in the air, and I could feel people watching us, waiting to see what I'd say. This was a moment where I could choose reconciliation, where I could accept their olive branch and move forward, where I could have the approval I'd once desperately wanted. But I didn't want it anymore. I'm going to decline that invitation, I said clearly. Not out of spite or revenge, but because I don't need your approval anymore. I don't need your validation or your acceptance or your acknowledgement of my worth. I know what I'm capable of. I know what I've built and what I'm going to build. And none of that requires your blessing. Caroline looked stunned. Richard's face hardened. Nathan looked devastated. This isn't about being petty, I continued. This is about recognizing that some foundations once cracked can't be repaired. You taught me that I wasn't good enough for your world. And I've realized that your world isn't good enough for me. I turned to walk away, but Ella caught up with me. That was amazing, she said quietly. I wish I had your courage. You do have it, I told her the same thing I'd said before. You just have to decide to use it. She hugged me quickly, and then I walked away from the Brooks family for the last time. I didn't look back to see their reactions. I didn't care anymore. My presentation that night was a triumph. I spoke about sustainable design and community-focused development, about building structures that served people rather than ego, about creating something that would last. The applause was long and genuine, and afterward I was surrounded by people wanting to discuss potential projects, offering collaborations, congratulating me on my vision. In the crowd, I spotted someone unexpected. Leah Sutton, the ex-girlfriend, the gold standard I'd been compared to for months. She was there as an art critic, covering the gala for some magazine. She made her way over to me after most of the crowd had dispersed. Xenia Ward, she said, extending her hand. I don't know if you remember me. We met briefly at your engagement party. I remember, I said, shaking her hand. I wanted to apologize, Leah continued, for being used as a weapon against you. I heard from Ella what Caroline did, constantly comparing us, using me as some kind of standard you were supposed to meet. That was unfair to both of us. I studied her looking for insincerity, but she seemed genuine. It's not your fault, I said. You were just the tool they used. If it hadn't been you, it would have been someone else. Still, Leah said. For what it's worth, I think Nathan was an idiot to let you go. And I think Caroline and Richard were fools to underestimate you. What you've built with Riverside, it's remarkable. It's real. It matters. Thank you, I said, and I meant it. We talked for a while longer, and I realized that Leah wasn't the enemy I'd imagined her to be. She was just another woman who'd had to navigate the Brooks family's impossible expectations, and she'd been lucky enough to escape before it destroyed her. The gala ended late, and I took a taxi back to my apartment, exhausted but triumphant. I stood on my small balcony looking out at the city, and I thought about how far I'd come. A year ago, I'd been crying in Nathan's apartment, feeling worthless and small. Now I was here successful and respected and entirely myself. My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "This is Richard Brooks. I wanted to reach out personally to say again how sorry I am for how we treated you. I'd like to discuss potential investment opportunities in your firm. Please call me when you're available." I read the text twice, then deleted it. They wanted to invest in my success now, to claim some piece of it, to say they'd supported me all along. But I didn't need their money or their connections or anything else they could offer. The next few months were a blur of success and opportunity. The Riverside project was completed ahead of schedule and under budget, a rare achievement in urban development. The design was featured in architectural magazines, won sustainability awards, and became a model for future development projects. My firm grew from just me to a team of 12 talented architects and designers. We moved into a proper office space with conference rooms and drafting tables and all the trappings of a real substantial business. Invitations poured in to speak at conferences, to consult on major projects, to serve on advisory boards. I was building exactly the kind of career I dreamed about, and I was doing it on my own terms, with my own values, without compromise. The Brooks family tried to reach out a few more times. Nathan sent flowers on the anniversary of what would have been our wedding day, with a card that read, "I hope you're happy. You deserve it." Caroline invited me to a charity gala she was organizing. Richard sent another message about investment opportunities. I ignored all of them. Ella, though, I stayed in touch with. She'd finally stood up to her family, had told them she was tired of their judgment and their impossible standards. She'd moved into her own apartment, was thriving in her social work, and had started dating someone her parents would definitely not approve of. Good for her. 6 months after the Riverside Gala, I ran into Nathan one last time. It wasn't planned or dramatic, just one of those random New York moments where the city is so big and so small at the same time. I was coming out of a coffee shop near my office when I saw him walking down the street. He looked better than he had the last time I'd seen him, healthier, more put together. He saw me at the same moment, and we both stopped. "Xenia," he said. "Nathan," I replied. We stood there awkwardly for a moment. Then Nathan spoke. "You look good," he said. "Happy." "I am," I told him honestly. "How are you?" "Better," he said. "I'm working at a different firm now, one I chose instead of one my father chose for me. It's smaller, less prestigious, but I actually enjoy the work." "I'm glad," I said, and I meant it. "I heard about Riverside," Nathan continued. "About all the awards and recognition. I'm proud of you, Zen. You built something incredible." "Thank you," I said. There was a pause, and then Nathan said something that surprised me. "I'm grateful to you, for leaving. For not letting me drag you down into the life my parents wanted for me. You saved us both, even if it didn't feel like it at the time." "I don't know if I saved you," I replied. "But I saved myself." "That's what I mean," Nathan said. "You showed me that it was possible to choose differently, to walk away from expectations and build something real. It took me a while to follow your example, but I got there eventually." "I'm glad you did," I said sincerely. We talked for a few more minutes about small things, inconsequential things. It was surprisingly easy, surprisingly free of the pain and anger that had defined our last interactions. We'd both moved on, both grown, both become people we couldn't have been if we'd stayed together. When we parted ways, Nathan said one last thing. "For what it's worth, I understand now what you meant about foundations. About how love isn't enough if it's not built on something solid. I hope you find someone who gives you that solid foundation." "I hope you do too," I told him. He walked away, and I watched him go with a sense of peace. That chapter was truly closed now, no lingering regrets or what-ifs, just a clean ending and a clear path forward. But the story doesn't end with Nathan or with the Brooks family getting what they deserved, though Richard's investment firm did take a significant hit, and they did have to sell the Westchester estate eventually. The story ends with me standing on my own 2 feet, building the life I'd always wanted. A year after the Riverside project was completed, I was approached about an even bigger opportunity to design a sustainable community development in California, a project that would house thousands of families and set new standards for environmental responsibility in urban planning. It was the kind of project that could define a generation of architecture, and they wanted me to lead it. I accepted, of course. How could I not? The day I signed the contract, I went back to my apartment and stood on the balcony looking out at the city one last time before I'd moved to the West Coast for the new project. I thought about that first Sunday dinner at the Brooks estate, about how small and unwelcome I'd felt. I thought about Caroline's subtle cruelties and Richard's dismissive attitude. I thought about Nathan's weak excuses and weaker spine. And then I thought about the moment I'd slammed that ring down on the counter, the moment I'd chosen myself over their approval. Some houses collapse in silence. I thought the same thing I'd thought so many times before. Others are rebuilt stronger. This time the foundation only carries one name: mine. I didn't dream about closed doors anymore. I dreamed about open horizons, about the buildings I'd design, the projects I'd lead, the life I'd create on my own terms. No one could take that from me because I'd built it myself from the ground up with materials. No one else could see courage, self-worth, and the unshakable knowledge that I deserved better. The next morning, I packed up my apartment and prepared for the move to California. As I was loading boxes into the moving truck, my phone rang. It was an unknown number with a New York area code. For a second, I thought about not answering, worried it might be another Brooks family attempt at reconciliation. But curiosity got the better of me, and I answered. "Xenia Vord," a woman's voice said. "Yes, this is she. This is Margaret Sutton, Laya's mother. I hope you don't mind me calling. Laya gave me your number." I was surprised, but intrigued. "Not at all, Mrs. Sutton. What can I do for you?" "I wanted to invite you to lunch," Margaret said. "I'm on the board of the Architectural Preservation Society, and we're looking for new members. Leia mentioned your work on Riverside and suggested you'd be perfect for our board. I'd love to discuss it with you if you're interested." I smiled. The universe had a funny way of working things out. Here was Margaret Sutton, Caroline Brooks's friend, the woman whose daughter I'd been unfavorably compared to for months, offering me an opportunity that had nothing to do with Nathan or his family and everything to do with my own merits. "I'd love to," I said. "Though I should mention I'm moving to California next week for a new project." "Even better," Margaret said warmly. "We have members all over the country. Your California project would actually be a tremendous asset to our discussions about sustainable preservation." We scheduled a lunch for later that week, and as I hung up, I couldn't help but laugh. The Brooks family had spent so much energy trying to make me feel like I didn't belong in their world, and here I was being courted by that same world on my own terms for my own accomplishments. The lunch with Margaret was delightful. She was nothing like Caroline, warm and genuine and truly interested in my work rather than my pedigree. She told me that she'd always thought Caroline was too concerned with appearances and not enough with substance, and that she was glad Nathan had dated Laya only briefly because she'd never thought he was good enough for her. "Daughter, I like you much better," Margaret said candidly over dessert. "You've built something real. You stand for something that matters. That's rare in this city, and it's exactly what our board needs." I accepted her invitation to join the board, touched by her sincerity and excited by the opportunity. As I was leaving the restaurant, I ran into one more person from my past, Ella. She was meeting someone for lunch, and she lit up when she saw me. "Xenia," she exclaimed, hugging me. "I heard about the California project." "That's incredible." "Thank you," I said. "I heard you're doing well, too. Your own apartment, thriving at work." Ella grinned. "I took a page from your book. Decided I'd rather be respected than approved of. Best decision I ever made. My parents barely speak to me, but I've never been happier." "Good for you," I said sincerely. "Actually, Ella said I wanted to thank you for showing me what it looks like to stand up for yourself. You probably don't realize it, but you changed my life that night at the engagement party. Watching you refuse to accept being treated like you weren't enough, it woke something up in me." "I'm glad I could help," I said. "But you did the hard part yourself. You made the choice to change." We talked for a few more minutes, exchanging contact information and promising to stay in touch. As I walked away, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. I hadn't just rebuilt my own life. I'd inadvertently helped someone else rebuild theirs too. The move to California was bittersweet. I was excited for the new project, but New York had been my home for so long. Still, as the plane took off and I watched the city shrink below me, I felt nothing but anticipation for what was ahead. The California project was everything I hoped it would be and more. The team was brilliant, the vision was ambitious, and the impact would be enormous. I threw myself into the work with the same passion I'd brought to Riverside, and the results were even more spectacular. 2 years into the California project, I received a letter. It was on expensive stationery, the kind that screamed old money and good breeding. The return address was the Brooks family estate in Westchester, though I'd heard they'd sold it. I almost threw it away without opening it, but curiosity won out. The letter was from Caroline Brooks. It was handwritten, which surprised me, and it was long. She wrote about regret and reflection about how watching me succeed had made her realize how wrong she'd been, not just about me, but about so many things. She wrote about how Richard had died the year before a heart attack, and how his death had made her reevaluate her priorities and her values. "I know I can never make up for how I treated you," Caroline wrote. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness or even your acknowledgement of this letter. But I wanted you to know that you were right about everything. About me, about my family, about what really matters. I spent so much of my life worrying about appearances and status and maintaining some idea of who the Brooks family should be, and in the end, all of that was meaningless. Richard died unsatisfied, Nathan is estranged from us, and Ella won't return my calls. I drove away everyone who mattered by insisting they meet standards that were arbitrary and cruel. You were the only one brave enough to refuse to play that game, and I hated you for it at the time. Now I realize you were the only one who really understood what strength looks like." The letter went on for several more paragraphs, detailing Caroline's regrets and her attempts to change. It ended with a simple statement. "You were always too good for us, Zinnia. I just wish I'd been wise enough to see it sooner." I folded the letter carefully and put it in a drawer. I didn't throw it away, but I didn't respond either. Caroline's regrets weren't my responsibility, and her apology, while seemingly heartfelt, came far too late to change anything. But I did hope she meant what she said. I hoped she was genuinely learning and growing. Not for my sake, but for hers. The California project was completed 3 years after I started it, another triumph that garnered national attention and numerous awards. My firm had grown to 30 employees with offices in New York and Los Angeles. I was invited to speak at universities, to consult on major developments around the world, to serve as an advisor to cities working on sustainability initiatives. I'd built exactly the kind of career I'd dreamed about, and I'd done it without compromise, without sacrificing who I was, without needing anyone's approval but my own. So here's what I want to ask you, because I know some of you watching this have been where I was. You're sitting in that cold house feeling small, wondering if you should just keep trying to fit in. You're accepting those subtle insults, making excuses for people who don't respect you, sacrificing pieces of yourself for relationships that don't give back. When do you slam that ring down? When do you choose yourself? When do you walk away from people who make you feel small and start building something that makes you feel powerful? Leave me a comment and tell me your story. And if this resonated with you, if you've ever had to choose between being accepted and being respected, hit that like button and subscribe. Because we all deserve to build our lives on foundations that can't be shaken.